All right, so I'm going to talk real quick about our problems for our data analysis, and I'm going to look at campuses with the highest percentage. We'll start with this. Actually, you know what? Let's do all 10 across the state. Which campus had the greatest increase? So again, this is where we're going to look at. We're going to need to look at our volume of test takers and percentages for 2 years. So 2020 test takers. 20 percentages, same thing. 2019 all right, so we know that we can do a VLOOKUP using this code in our 2020 comma in our 2020 range, grab all of the information I need. These are the columns I'm going to be using for this for sure. And then what is the index? Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tells me how many test takers there are. Great. Same thing, grab, copy, and paste. Tells me 7. Tells me a percentage. Right, if I look at my values, go back over here, I don't have any information in that, so that looks like that lines up. Let's do the same for 2019. So again, I'm going to do a VLOOKUP equals VLOOKUP with my unique code in 2019. Grab these columns. Because there's this empty slot, this is actually going to be a 6, is going to be a 7. And I can again say false. Great. And the next column over is going to be column 8. Great. I'm going to go back and add false on these two just because we don't know if the values are sorted going forward. And it doesn't hurt to have that put in there. All right, grab all those, double click. Again, it's thinking it's going to find all the information we need. So we want to know who had the greatest growth. So I'm going to do this is change of this value, but the after minus the before. And I'm going to drag that through. Actually, if I delete this column, I can just double click. That'll save me a second. Okay. And because again we have this NA, I'm going to do an if error, which will get our NAs out of the mix. Okay. So now it wants to know that's our greatest change in between our test taker values. Let's look at our biggest difference. This is our change in test takers. Let's look at the change in percent equals. And again, this is an if error. Our after minus our before. Great. Double click through. Awesome. So now I need to do what is the greatest. Let's confirm the question. Which campus had the greatest increase, and then which campus had the greatest decrease? So I can do in my campus, let's do a filter of all of this, comma, where this value, actually we don't even need a filter. Why don't we just do a sort? So I'm going to do a sort of my ranges by which column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and is ascending false. So we want to know a North Pitt had a positive 91. So I'm going to write over here, North Pitt High School. Had plus 91. Let's look at the same thing, but percentages. So again, what column? 8. Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, North Pitt High School has the highest with a positive range of 51. So they've got a double, almost a 1.5 their previous test takers. Uh, 51% growth. Cool. Now let's do the opposite. Who had the least? So again, is ascending true? Column 7. West Mecklenburg High had negative 95. And same thing, but for our percentages, 8. Weldon High School had a negative 57.3%. Okay, so which campuses has the highest percentage test takers? Okay, so we go back to campuses, and I have a value that is our percentages, which was 2020, and I want to see what is the highest here. So let's go back to our sort by column 1, 2, 3, 4, and is ascending false. And we're going to see a number of campuses, and see there's a lot of kind of noise here between campus, this value that is a less than 10 or 20%. Here we are. These 6 schools have 100%. Okay, so I come over here, findings. These are my 6 schools with 100%. Okay, and now I'm going to do some filtering. I might need to do some filtering and some sorts, but I'm definitely going to do some filtering. So I can do, and let's get that, let's just see the same thing for the district before I go any further, because it said findings, which district had the highest average test takers. So I can go to, the way to do that would be, you'd have to do an average if for each district. So we could do that. We're on our districts tab, and I want to do so they're going to have this value in the column B. So in column B, let's do a test. Average ifs, criterion, if the column B has, and then criterion is going to look at our district is this number, then average, go back, the total test takers. And if I look at Alamance Burlington, let's just do it as a, make sure we did this right, 1036.75, and I come over, grab, look at my values. If I look at Alamance Burlington, and I grab those, and I look at the average, 1036.85. Great. So I know that I got that calculated, and I can then drag that through and figure out, maybe I do a equals a sort of this range by column 3 and false. Tells me hide. What is it divided by 0? Let's see what's the story here with this district. Hide school. So let's see, I don't know what that error was, so I'm going to do a if error. And then I can grab through that, clear that all out, and double click it again. And now I should see Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools had a highest average grab for the district. So paste that in. Had the highest average test takers. Oh, that's a different question. So let me confirm that I did that right. I think I was looking at the test average, not the test takers. So let's go to column, instead of average if H, I want to get the average if on column percentages, G. So come over here, fix that real quick before I go further. Districts, G to G, not H to H. Great. Clear that out. Double click it again. Union County had the average of their schools 93, almost 94% average between all campuses. Great. All right, so across the state, which campus with 100 more had the highest average total scores? So I could do that a couple different ways. I could do that without really even using my VLOOKUPs, but I'm going to use this value since I do have a column here. I'm going to clear all this out. This is my score column, but I actually want to get the total now because that's the value I'm looking for. But I also want to get the, this is number of test takers. Let's also do the 2020 total since we already have that. Again, what is my VLOOKUP? What is the total score? That's column, I think, 9. Let's see what that looks like. 8. 14 to 28. Let's confirm that NC School of Science and Math, 1428. That looks great. Come back and double click through. Okay. So now I need to do a filter equals a filter. I want to find just the schools that have test takers. So again, that's column C greater than 100. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so I get a couple things. I get some text values that I don't want, but that's a good start. So I'm going to do a C to C that does not equal the string of greater than less than 10. Filter those out too. Great. So now see it, but I don't have it sorted by the highest score. So the question was, just make sure we get this right. Which campus, so again, we're in the right thing, we're looking at campuses, of 100 or more test takers had the highest average total score. So I can come back over here, and maybe I do a sort by my fourth column, comma 4, comma false. And I find that NC School of Science and Math had 239 test takers and 1428. All right, now same thing. Which campus? Now we're looking at 500, right? So, oh, this is districts. So let's go back to our districts tab. I'm going to clear this out. What information do I want? I want to look at, I'm going to clear this out. I need to get VLOOKUPs for my test takers and my totals, and a VLOOKUP with this as my search key in 2020. I'm looking for that information, comma, which is my column. So again, I'm looking for test takers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's say false again. 720, that looks right. 762 is Alamance Burlington. Cool. And I'm going to grab that same information, go over a column, and make sure that I'm looking at my total. So that would be 1036. That's going to be let's say 8. Great. 1036. That looks like that's getting all the information I need. Double click through. And the question was, which district with 500 or more test takers had the highest total average? Excuse me. And I'm going to go back to my districts, come over here and do a filter, grab the districts with my test takers greater than 500. Does something like this. Great. And I want to say sort this by my column of totals, which is my fourth column. False will give me my top one, which should say, again, I've got some clutter here. I could easily cancel that out by saying something filter greater than, and also CC is not equal to less than 10. Great. And I get Chapel Hill City Schools with a over 500 check and the highest average of those people. So that goes in something like this. Great. And I can now I'm back to campus. So I'm go back to my campus tab. Now it says 250, and instead of looking at totals, I'm now looking at the English reading and writing. So again, I want to make sure I get the right value here. I need to do a VLOOKUP for my English reading writing. Let's go back. And reading writing I think is a 9. It's going to say out of range, so I need to add a column here, 702. Let's make sure that that's right for NC School of Science and Math. 702 is English reading and writing. Great. I can kind of confidently assume that that's good. Great. So my filter, I want it said find schools with more than 250. So I'm going to change this value to 250 and not equal to negative less than 10. And now I want to sort that information. Let's get another column here. I want to include my English reading writing. Yep. So that puts that in my values here. But I now need to sort that by that column, which is going to be a 5. And I see that it's descending. That looks good. And again, NC School of Science and Math had a high score of 702. Great. So that tells me that. Copy. And then my findings, NC School of Science and Math, 293 test takers with a 702 for that particular section of the test. Okay, based on the score, where does Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools rank in that section? Okay, so English reading and writing, I'm going to go to districts, get my totals. We just did this, but instead of copy this over, this is my English reading and writing, and I'm going to paste that in 2020, yep, and I want column I and 9, and let's confirm that that's the case. Alamance Burlington, English reading and writing of, let's make sure that that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at where do we rank in English reading and writing. Come back to districts, 517, go to 2020, Alamance Burlington 517, great, English reading writing. Come back, double click that through. Okay. So where does Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools? I can look down. We are number V6. We are 681, right? So let's do a VLOOKUP. Yeah, right. A VLOOKUP, where this search key in this area is index would be 5, 643, or 638 rather, and let's confirm that that's the case. I come down here to Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, 638. Where is 638? Where does that rank in our range? It ranks us, whoop, I need to do a comma in our data, first place. So our English reading writing is our first range. Okay, so then it wants to do, whoop, Let's paste this in here. Where does Chapel Hill High? So now we're on to campuses. So I go to campuses. I want to know where do, and I'm going to clear this out, where does that VLOOKUP, and I'm going to look for what is that value for Chapel Hill Culver City, for Chapel Hill High. Chapel Hill High 681 and 308. So I can copy that. 681, 308. Where is that? Whoop. 681, 308. Copy. Where does VLOOKUP that value in my search? And then I want to look at this column, which doesn't exist yet. I want to say maybe this is going to be my math column, right? And is sorted false. Okay, and it's going to give me an error because it doesn't exist. So let's say 2020 math. Same thing, but now I'm looking at column 10. In a column, I'm going to need another J. Great. Let's make sure math 725. Come back over here. 725, that lines up. And campuses, double click. Okay. And I want to say, where does this live in the range F? 618 in our range. Column index would be 627. Let's confirm that that's where we were. In math, 681, Chapel Hill, 627. Where does that rank? Rank, comma, out of this whole list, 14. Great. 14, and I can paste this over here. Right, so that's how I found that. 14. Okay, based on the scores, where does Chapel Hill High rank compared to these other schools, plus or minus 25? So finding competitors. And so I can say, let's do a filter. Filter all of this where my test takers are greater than 214 and my test takers are less than 264. Should give me some schools right there. Great. And then it wants us to find where, we're going to now need to do a sort. It says find where are we compared in the total score column. So I come over back to here, and I'm going to use these reference points since I'm getting a little bit confused by what columns are which. So I want to sort my fourth column. Sort for false. And we are second place, come behind East. So there's my second place to East Chapel Hill High. And I can see that I did that with a formula that looks like this. Grab that, come back over. Okay, and then the last question is, based on the school district has the highest total average. So this is a really weird question, and I don't know that it really tells us much. What this particular thing was trying to just have you start to think about, how do I try to make some evaluations of other things. And so in this case, it wanted us to divide our total by the total number of test takers, which just tells us, I guess, I don't know what that really tells us, but it's, so that the results are kind of all over the place. I had some people who used a filter that said, I want to filter small schools, so I'm going to do test takers under a certain amount. So this is my test taker, my totals divided by my test taker. So that's like what the average, it's not even what the variation would be. It just means that if you divide it up, that's what it looks like. What that means is that when we sort this, so if I do a sort of this whole range, sort of the range by my sort column, which is going to be my 6, is ascending false. Tells us, and then Tyrrell County, they had 14 people take it at a 1493. Like that doesn't mean that that's a high score. Like we had this schools down here, there might be something like 1145. This is if we sorted the score. I mean, there's too many things that are really being into play here to get a definitive answer. Again, I think you could probably say Tyrrell Schools has a 67 there, but if you did a filter, right, if instead of sorting it here, let's say I want to filter this information, filter where my test takers is, less than 100 and my total average score is greater than 1100, right? I'm going to find, and then if maybe I sorted that, you could find a variation in between this. Polk County, they did great. They had 42 students with an average here. These 44 students had an above 1100 average. It doesn't really tell us, that's still, if we look at this, 26, when I go back and look at what Tyrrell County had, again, Tyrrell had a 67 because, again, though their average test score was not very good, they only had 14 people take it. So I don't know what this column really means. It's really just kind of making you start to think like, I might have to think about how to analyze some of these different things against each other. So if I were to do it, there's not a real right answer for number 10. But I think that Polk County is pretty high up there, right? This is a 42 with a higher of this, or Polk County or Tyrrell County with, again, the 67. So that's how to do all of those. And if you have any questions, we'll work through them. But I think that's a good start. If you can start to use those sorts and filters, you'll get start to get an understanding of what your data does and how you can do some interesting stuff with it. Thanks.